So, Daphne, we should probably record a little bit of something here at the beginning of the show to describe what happened in the middle of the show. What do you think?
Yeah, I think so. I think we absolutely should. So this is, welcome to technology. My internet decided to just stop, which it does, for whatever reason where I'm at in Oklahoma City, there are just moments. So the internet decided to just quit. I think it's a perfect example of being present. I want to say a word. This is also what happens when you have an incredibly awesome teammate that you're working with. Because, I just didn't panic. I'm like, he's got this. He's got my back. Yeah, he's got my back. So I just had to make some adjustments over here. Thank goodness I have cellular data on my iPad. Yep. So just make a shift over to the iPad. Had to get the app for StreamYard. Just did it all very, relatively quickly. I think it was 2 minutes or something.
Yeah, and so what I wanted to do is I wanted to let you guys know that halfway through our conversation, I start talking about an experience I had back in 2007, sitting on the couch, and then all of a sudden, Daphne's not there anymore. and then as soon as I finish that, you will hear an abrupt change in the kind of our conversational tone, and then also Daphne's equipment has changed, and so the audio quality will be a little bit different. We just wanted to let you know in front of the show what that is coming up. But Daphne, real quick, before we play the intro music, what are we talking about today?
Today we are talking about our power being found in the present.
Welcome to Life, the ultimate choose-your-own adventure game with hosts Cliff Ravenscraft and Daphne Scott. Join this dynamic duo as they explore the profound concept of life as a thrilling adventure, blending ancient wisdom and modern psychology. Embrace the joy of living with presence, creativity, and playfulness. It's time to navigate the game of life together. Are you ready to play? Let the adventure begin.
Today, I picked up on the dynamic duo, and I thought of us as Batman and Robin.
Yeah, I heard thrilling adventure.
Thrilling adventure.
Okay, so who's Batman and who's Robin?
I don't know.
You don't?
I'll be the sidekick, so you're Batman.
Oh, you want me to be? Okay. That's funny. I was thinking of myself as Robin. But I can be Batman. Or we can switch.
We can switch. You know what? I like Wonder Twin powers activate. So can we go back and change the opening script to the Wonder Twins instead of the dynamic duo?
Do you think that we would be dating ourselves? Sometimes I say things to people and I realize, they have no idea what I'm talking about.
Let me ask you this, Daphne. How do you spell relief? It's ROLAIDS, right?
Yeah. Plop, plop, fizz, fizz. How about this one? Time to make the donuts.
Oh, yes. I
said it to myself today.
I can see the Dunkin' Donut guy now.
Yeah, that was such a great commercial.
You know where we're living right now? In the past.
You're in the past, man. We're in the past and enjoying it in the present. So weird. Time is so strange.
Isn't that funny? You're right. It is in the past, but we're enjoying it in the moment, which is something that I was thinking about this morning as I was contemplating what we might cover in our conversation. Yeah. And oftentimes we think that we're suffering from the past when the past is always back in a previous experience. It was experienced many, 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 many years ago in most cases. And what we're suffering from today is not what happened in the past, but it's what we're doing in the moment.
Yeah. And allowing our thoughts, which is really, we say memory, which is so interesting. It really is simply a thought. It's truly no different than any other sort of thought bubble that would arrive. And then we label it a memory because it's something that we have an experience of occurring in the past, which is also sort of strange. Yet it's simply a thought. It's no different than any other thought. So, for example, I could have a thought about, I broke my Apple Pencil.
How does one do that?
Well, I have a case that I put it in, and it kind of got wedged in there. And so as I went to pull it, I just torqued just a little bit, and the very end of it snapped off, like broke off. But interestingly enough, I put electrical tape around it. It's become a new design element. Anyhow, my point of saying all that was, I could have I could have a thought about, oh, I broke the tip of my pencil off. It's no different than, oh, I had a lovely time with Cliff last week, or I had a horrible time with so-and-so last week. They're just all thoughts arising. So we have a certain way of then, to your point, Cliff, we can create suffering when we keep replaying the thought. We've talked about this on the show. When we keep reliving that thought / memory and really create our own suffering for ourselves, which I think is what you're sort of pointing to there.
Yeah. I did not have the word memory in our bingo card for today, but I'm thrilled that you brought it up, because as it relates to this, there's a thought that immediately flashed in my mind as soon as you started bringing up memories. Yeah. And one of my favorite things about thinking about the past in the present moment, what we are doing is we are remembering an experience. So basically it has been dismembered, it has been taken apart, and now in our mind we are remembering it.
Yeah.
So we're putting it back together. And in fact, we're representing the previous experience. We are representing it for our mind to have an experience.
Yeah. And by the way, pretty inaccurately.
Yeah, that is exactly where I was going to go, because we never truly experienced what fully happened.
Yeah.
Because our brains are designed to delete, distort, and generalize all of the seemingly infinite amounts of vibrational data that's coming into our five senses. Yes. And the only way we can really make sense of anything is to delete, distort, and generalize anything that we don't deem to be important. And so what we have is we have a limited perspective of an experience that's happened in the past, and through passage of times, so many other things influence those memories, such that when we are representing or representing them to ourselves today, or remembering the experience, it's not even the experience that we actually originally had. There's been a lot of new emotion and thought and beliefs that are now put on top of it.
Yeah. And I just had this thought of me trying to put together a car for some reason, trying to remembering putting the pieces of this car together, and it just not looking anything like a car whatsoever. That's really what happens in our mind. And therefore we should definitely put a lot of stock in the past and how we think we remember things.
Yeah.
No, we should not. And actually it's not even that we are making a conscious choice. Like, our brains are wired. Like, we don't even see the full spectrum of light. We don't hear the full spectrum of sound, right? Like, I mean, when you realize that we are just limited creatures in that way. I mean, maybe limited is not the best word, but we can't take it all in. It probably should give us a little bit of pause. Yeah. That maybe we're not seeing everything clearly, Yeah,
I'm not going to take any issue with the words "we are limited." But one of the things that I love is the idea of the understanding and giving ourselves grace to say that we're not tuned in to all of the data that's available.
Yeah, that's a great way to say it. And there's no way that we could be.
Right. Exactly. So, for example, without the aid of some sort of equipment, I cannot actually present to you or myself the various different television signals that are actually right here in between that camera and me. There is shortwave radio, AM radio, FM radio, and then there's commercial bandwidth radio. Tons of signals, right? I mean, literally, if I put a device right here, stuck up an antenna, and it was tuned to certain frequencies.
Yeah.
It's right here, right now. Hundreds, if not thousands of different signals right here. But I see nothing other than the camera right now.
Isn't that great? It's great. And always good for pause. You should give us pause. Let us have a little bit of humility.
Well, here's the thing. What a gift it is that we're not able to see all of those things.
Yeah. How distracting.
That's exactly it. How could we process and tune into the beauty of what it is that we are seeing if we were distracted with everything else? If we were seeing through a bunch of wavy little blurry little signals and vibrations and distortions and all this other stuff. So I in a way, I'm fascinated by how our brain is so tuned to what it is that we do experience. And just like you said, the recognition that we don't have all of the data it really does help me in the present moment understand that, wow, what I interpreted in the past as being the experience, there might be more to the story.
Yeah. And usually there is. Actually, one of my teachers used to say, the plot thins. Actually, there's less to it. You actually added a bunch onto it, which is what we typically do. So what we're really getting at today in the show is this idea that our true power is really found in the present moment. And I wanted to bring, this came from the show last week. You said it. And I think that's a direct quote from you.
It was. And by the way, it's a direct quote from 2 or 3 different chapters of a book called The Nature of Personal Reality by Jane Roberts, which represents something called the Seth Materials, which is very far out there and interesting in and of itself. But
look it up.
I will tell you that I love reading those materials, and so many things that I have learned that I've okay, if that were true, what would that look like for me? And then going in and implementing some of the things that I never considered before. And then all of a sudden, I find myself able to do things I never dreamed of doing before. This is a pretty wild stuff. My power is in the present moment.
Mm-hmm. It is, and I haven't read what you've cited yet. However, this has not been only said by this person or persons. This has been, and this is what our show is all about. We're going to pull from modern psychology. We're pulling from ancient wisdoms. We're pulling from all of it, and really finding the common threads. And this would be an absolute common thread. This idea of being present, being here now. I mean, Ram Dass wrote the Be Here Now. It was the classic in the 60s.
By the way, do not buy that in Kindle version. It is totally not. Get the physical book.
Yeah, the physical book is great. Agreed. So, so what are we talking about, right? This idea of being present. And I know you'll put forth a couple ideas around this, and I want to put a couple. There's one definition that I really like. And it is described this way. Being present is really being in the moment of being in a non-threatened, non-reactive state. Non-threatened, non-reactive state. In other words, in a non-triggered state. That is one experience that we can have that would say that allows us to be here now. In other words, when we're in a threatened or triggered state, we tend to be, I don't know if you've noticed this, but we tend to be with our minds going into the past, running a past script. And if we spend enough time in the past, we typically will start to experience this sort of feeling of regret. It's really an interesting phenomenon. I don't know if you've experienced this, but it's been written about. I've experienced it for sure. As well as if we go into the future, our minds go into the future in a threatened reactive state, they tend to. And we play out scenarios that are typically doomsday type scenarios. And if we spend enough time there, we will experience a lot of anxiety or the experience of anxiety. So when we're in a threatened reactive state, our minds tend to be vacillating way into the past. They get just kind of stuck there for a while. We ruminate in the past, and then very quickly they can go into the future and we'll ruminate in the future. And I think this is the other part that happens when we are in a threatened reactive state. We are in a pattern of rumination. We are simply just playing this cognitive emotional loop, just circling and circling, recycling and recycling. So I wanted to try to paint a picture of what it feels like when we're not in the present moment. And then we're going to get into, well, what's it mean to be in the present moment? But I think if we can paint a picture of what it's like when we're not, I think that will give us some clues. So, yeah.
So where do you want to begin in that process?
Well, wherever you'd like. I mean, I think, kind of just painting that picture a little bit so that people, because I think, in all the reading, I don't know if this is true for you, but all the reading, studying, meditating, mindfulness stuff, I think people talk about this a lot, but it's sort of, what's the experience like when we're not present?
So I will tell you one of the most, highest general anxiety that I've ever felt in my life, where I was not able to experience the present moment. I was so stuck, both in the past and in the future.
Yeah.
It was in December 2007. So I had in September 2007 put my 90-day notice at the insurance agency that my mom and dad owned, the family business. I had given them 3-month notice. I'm leaving to go become full-time self-employed. And now we're looking, it's about 2 weeks before I'm full-time self-employed, and I'm entering into the great unknown. Everything that I have known as my identity is basically about ready to just disappear overnight.
Yes.
And I am wondering, do I have what it takes? Is this the biggest mistake that I'm about ready to make? And, who am I to think that this is the right thing to do? And so the funny thing is that I was super excited, like all day, just all of a sudden having a great, wonderful day. At the end of that day, Stephanie asked me if I would be interested in watching a television show, and I said, sure. We sat down to watch television. I'm laughing out loud at what's being said on the television, what's being played out. And to this day, I don't have any recollection of what the trigger was. There was some story that was being told, or some phrase that was said, or some scenario, and instantly I was triggered into almost a panic attack. It felt like it's like a heart palpitations. And I'm like, I felt it down in my gut. I'm like, but in my chest, I'm just like feeling this tightness. I couldn't breathe. I was starting to hyperventilate. Now, I was playing it kind of cool. All of this,
you're like sitting on the couch or something, right? You're just
I'm sitting on the couch. Stephanie doesn't have any clue that this is actually happening inside of me.
Yeah.
But all of a sudden, I can tell you right now, I am not paying attention to that television. I am not paying attention to the fact that I've just had a wonderful day, did incredible things. The weather is great. What a blessed evening. I wasn't thinking about all the things in the present moment that there was to be filled with gratitude for. All I can tell you is I had been triggered into all sorts of things in the past that people have said about, my ability to take action, to be disciplined, to be this, to be that, and then all of a sudden projecting all of that into the future of I'm going to ruin our family financially. I'm going to, we're going to be homeless. It's like, I'm going to be the laughing stock. Everybody's going to see how much of a failure I am. All of these different things. I definitely was not living in the present moment. I was in the past, and as you were stating earlier, I was projecting into the future this horror film.
So again, this is what our mind does, right? So you pulled from the past all these things people had said about you. You buy into it. We don't. What is so great about your story is we don't know exactly what triggered this shift, right, in the state that you were in. Something did. We don't know what it is, which happens quite a bit. And then your mind ran off into the future to confirm what it believed about yourself from the past, to really create a lot of suffering for yourself.
Yeah.
I think what also is really great in this description, as we're defining what it means to not be present, is that if we had a video camera, right, and we were just video camera, like just that scene, what we would have seen is two people sitting on a couch viewing something on the TV, watching television, right? In its most simplest term, just a man on a couch, a man sitting. That's it. But all this other stuff, this whole narrative starts. And I think that's what's so great about your description, Cliff, is that you weren't even in like the space in which your body was occupied.
I was not on the couch. I was not in that living room. I was not in that time space. I was not in that year. I was not in that month. I was not in that day of the week. I was not in that hour, let alone in that minute.
And so you went into this threatened reactive state.
Yes.
Right? About something that wasn't even occurring in that moment. And I think this is really when we talk about now we could say you could get present to what you were experiencing internally, right? Present to a thought, present to,
I did not have the resources at the time to know that I had such power.
Yeah. And now you do.
And now I do.
And now you do. So yeah, so we can, and we'll get to that part of it too. But it's just, that's a perfectly painted description of what starts to happen when we're not present. We're running off in the future. We're pulling from the past. We're just not. And this is a practice. I don't want to get too far into the how. I know we will, but and I learned this again from Byron Katie. I can't tell you, and all my other teachers, I'm sure. But she would say in some of her writings, like, what is really here right now? Just a woman sitting in a chair, right? Yeah. A woman looking at the computer, whatever. There's really nothing else happening. Everything else I'm making up in my mind. Everything else.
Yep.
Yeah. Yes. So I thought painting a picture of what it means when we're not present, what it means when we're in this sort of reactive, threatened state. We can also be in somewhat of a mindless state too, and not noticing what's going on around us. People talk about distraction. I don't know where you land on this. I often experience myself when I am distracting myself, that it is a lower form of this vibration, that it is still some form of a, I'm going to say threatened state, but it is still some form of a fear state. It's still some form of an aversion state.
Are you talking about like an escapism kind of thing? Like I'm distracting myself in my mind because I'd rather be anywhere than where I am right now, doing what I'm doing right now.
Yes. Which I still see as a threatened, it's a lower, it maybe doesn't feel like it has as much of the fight-ish in it, but it's still the lower threatened state.
Yes, the word that I think I've probably used to describe that is that I am resistant to what is current.
Yes, it's still a resistance. I think that's it.
Yeah,
that's
and I can buy into your language of threatened. So I was bullied when I was a kid, so I have some associations with the word threatened, and I'm like, okay, I don't know that that's the word, but no. So if I think about what is the threat here, the threat is that I might experience some level of pain, and that I am not experiencing pleasure, and so if I consider that to be what I label as a threat, then I would say that right now I am doing something that somehow, some way, I believe is less than what I would prefer right now. And as a result of that, I would prefer something else, which means that I'm not experiencing that, which is at some level pain. And so this is where I begin to slightly understand what Buddhists and others are saying when they say that desire equals suffering. So this wanting something that is other than what is the birth of actual suffering in our life, our experience of resistance and feeling threatened.
Yeah, exactly. And I think threaten can feel like a very strong word. The threat to our identity, right? Like that's some of what you were talking about too. Like you'll not be able, you even said it, like I've already left one identity. I'm not going to be able to handle this other one or create this different, I'm going to look like a loser.
Yeah. I do want to say that the way that I described it, I was describing it using a lot of the understanding of the scenario from what I know today, which is and this is one of the things that I love. And so if most people that follow me for a very long time have heard the story of what happened during my first year of business. It was not a pretty year financially. So many things. It's like, listen, whatever you focus on consistently, you tend to manifest in your life. I focused a lot on how many ways this could go wrong financially, and I manifested that perfectly in my life. No, so what I will say though is that that was the beginning of an up and down emotional roller coaster. There was absolutely zero equanimity in my life in 2008, my first year in business. So for me to go back, if you would have asked me in March, I would have told you that, wow, I've got some real issues here. I probably am not emotionally healthy enough. I'm not probably disciplined enough. I don't know that I have what it takes and all these other things. Whereas today, in the present moment, I can go look back and see, it's like, wow, that was an incredibly empowering experience. Number one, it demonstrated to me just how important what I was creating was, that in spite of all of that I still moved forward. And there's so many things that I can see from a whole different perspective that today I look back at that experience and it's like, wow, that wasn't a pleasant experience at the moment, but it really was yet another opportunity for awakening to what's going on. How have I been conditioned to think and feel, and how am I judging myself? How do I view myself? It was an enlightening experience, although it was a very low level of that, early stage of that.
Yeah. And so, and this is, another great example, because I think this is where this idea of being present gets a little sort of twisted in that, does this mean we shouldn't think about the past? Does this mean we shouldn't, and my, my short answer is no, it doesn't mean that. It's you are able to look back at an experience and draw meaning from that, which, by the way, is really important in our lives. It is part of our well-being, is to draw meaning, and the meaning that you're drawing is the meaning of growth. Right. This is where the idea of resilience comes from, the ability to bounce back, the ability to take our learnings. And it's an interesting conversation when we get into how we find this meaning, how the challenges in our life and being challenged, sort of being put to the test, if you will, can, provide that meaning for us. We're weird creatures, man, because everyone thinks they want things easy, but not always. We find a lot of meaning in challenge, and sort of overcoming these sorts of things. And so, that's where the past can be really helpful to us too.
Yeah. Every time you say something, Daphne, I'm like, oh, here's another podcast episode. Do we truly want anything to be really easy in our life?
Well, let's talk about that next time. Oh. Now I got to make a note of that. So being present. So there's the ancient wisdom teachings that have been talking about this for a really long time. Modern psychology has talked about it. I'm going to put some examples of researchers who have done this. My favorite research on this was done by the researcher's last name is Killingsworth. There's two guys, and Killingsworth, and then Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, who wrote the book Flow. In 1990, by the way. I would highly recommend that book to anyone. I think the first 3 chapters of that book are some of the best writing I have ever read on our ability to work with our consciousness and to, I'm going to use the word change it, but the word expand it. And he specifically gives the example of a violin virtuoso, somebody becoming a violin virtuoso. And he's like, well, how did they do it? They just played and practiced. Same thing with our mind, right? You have to go to the consciousness gym every day. So Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, what both of these researchers and authors really landed on, Killingsworth did research where he pinged, we would think it was pinging. He had this where people's phones, throughout the day, there were 15,000 subjects. And he'd ask them, what are you doing right now? How happy do you feel? And how much is your mind wandering from the activity that you're doing? And what they were really looking at was that this propensity that we have for the mind to wander away from its doing. So let's use your story because it was so good. You're watching the TV, you're with Stephanie, you're having a lovely evening, and somewhere your mind, it went someplace else, right? And what his research revealed is that when people were fully or as present as they could be to the activity they were doing, by the way, no matter how jazzed they were about doing the activity or not, they experience higher levels of well-being, or what he defined as happiness, higher levels of well-being. What his research also revealed is that the mind, most people, on average, 47% of the time, their mind was someplace else.
That's interesting.
Isn't it?
So what if he was to ping me and say, what are you doing right now? And I'm like, well, what I'm doing right now is I am evaluating what I've experienced over the last 2 or 3 months in my business. And I'm currently asking myself, how do I feel about the results that I've got? And I'm currently envisioning what I want to create in the future. So in the present moment, I'm fully absorbed in the past and the present.
Yeah. Well, but you're doing it with the intent of evaluating your business.
Yes,
I think.
Yes.
Right.
I was just throwing that out there. It's like,
good.
Because the crazy thing is that what I just described, I do that quite a bit. So I have a daily practice of journaling. And one of the things that I understand is like, listen, I want to be very intentional about what vibrations I'm activating. So where I put my attention is whatever I put my attention to, I will activate the vibrational frequency of that thought, that experience. However, one of the things that I also have learned is that doesn't necessarily mean that I have to stay with what that vibration was. So I can go back, focus on what has happened. I can then step into what's called the seat of awareness and observe how that vibration, the reactional vibration that I had to that, I can then evaluate what meaning was being associated that caused me to feel that way. And I can then create a new meaning. I can come back and find a more purposeful, more empowering meaning associated to the thing in the past. I could take and learn and observe from it and then use that to benefit not just my current, but also my future prospect of moving things forwards towards achieving my goals. So that, I think if I go to what I'm talking about here is this idea of journaling. I think the real danger for me would lie in the idea that if I was to go into my journal and just ruminate about that negative, reactive, emotional thing, and this is why this is bad, and this is why this is bad, and this is why, and I don't know why this has always happened to me, and stuff like that. But I find myself going into a journaling experience, and what I typically will do is say, here's something that recently took place, and then I'll type that out very objectively, and then here's how I initially felt when I became aware of it. And then I would actually write what I observed, the thoughts, the fears, the anxieties, and this is the mental images of the future that were catastrophizing everything. And then what I love to do is I love to say, but here's what I know to be true. And and this is why I love, and this is why I come out with this statement that I said last week that prompted this. My power is in the present moment. In the present moment, I can choose what that past experience meant.
Yes.
And I can choose, and there's never a time that I could ever be refused the opportunity to learn and grow from any experience in life. And if one of my highest values is learning and growing, then practically anything I've ever experienced and ever will experience can be an empowering experience for me.
Yeah, and what I hear in this whole thread, Cliff, is there's an intentionality about what you're putting your attention on. There's an intentionality around recognizing your thought patterns, recognizing what thoughts are arising. Just journaling in itself, there's an intentionality. So that if this researcher pinged you with the question, you'd say, well, right now I'm actually evaluating my business, or I'm journaling, right? I'm doing my process. And then, well, how present are you? Very present. Versus I'm doing my process, and now what I notice I'm doing is I'm looking over at my phone, I'm paying attention to text messages that are arriving. I'm worried about the guy, taking care of the roof that's leaking. I'm not in my process, whatever your process is, right? You're someplace else. So I think that is really the core part of this, is that you're being very intentional. When we are being intentional, when we can be aware of where our mind has gone, when we can be aware that, hey, I'm with my kid right now sitting at this baseball game, and I just became aware that I'm thinking about everything going on at work. I'm thinking about the email I got 3 hours ago and thinking of all the clever comebacks I could make. I didn't make all the clever comebacks I should have made, and I didn't make them, and I'm not here now, right, in this moment. So I think, there's a lot of intentionality that you described too, that yes, we our minds, there is a absolute utility to our mind being able to learn, grab the past, the moments from the past, grab the learnings. This is what I tell a lot of my clients. Go in the past, get your learnings, and then get out of there. It's fine. I can help you very much. And the ability of as far as they know, we're the only creatures that can prospect. As far as they can tell, that can really think about a future existence, that can think about a future way of being, and then bring that into reality. Yeah. So there's some utility there. And, it has its limits, right? It has its limits. And our power, to your point, is really in the present. It really is being here now to say, okay, well, what am I up to right now? Where am I ruminating? Where am I, replaying this thing over and over again, simply to create. And I think this was the other part you brought up, simply that's creating suffering. When I really pay attention to how I'm feeling, now I can just see where I'm just creating a lot of suffering for myself. Like, what's the utility in that? And that's a very powerful question.
Yeah.
What am I getting from creating my own suffering?
Well, and there is usually a good reason for that. If you were to do a lot of self-inquiry and personal investigation as to why that's happening, you might find that maybe this is a way that you find certainty, and it may you may have some beliefs that at some level you deserve this level of suffering. And this is what you're worthy of, only so much success. We talked about this in The Big Leap, with Gay Hendricks having that upper limit challenge. But
yes,
I noticed I just said the word "but," and Daphne doesn't like that. So
how about this? I will let you use the word "but," and I will continue to make fun of the robots.
Okay, that's fine. So. The fun part is that when I said last week in passing, the power is in the present moment, and then I looked at the outline for today, I think there are two different themes that we're straddling here. So but I love it because so far everything has tied in beautifully. So when I think of the power is in the present moment, is the fact that I literally have the power in the present moment to re-engineer how I represent the past or represent it. I'm able to actually choose how to remember it or put it back together and build it in a way. I can recreate my past in the present moment. And also, in the present moment, I can create my future. I can create an image that I will manifest into my life if I can stay focused on that image, and that becomes my reality. And so there's so much about that. But then I also love the fact of, it's like, okay, that's wonderful, that's all great, but the spiritual practices are, hey, life can get a whole lot more exciting potentially, and a lot less resistant if you would just let go of the past and stop projecting into the future and constantly choose to live in the now.
Yeah.
Which is a separate theme from what I was thinking when I had that passing statement. And I think both are true.
Yes.
And at some level, I think it depends on what level of consciousness am I currently focusing my consciousness on.
Yeah. Well, I am glad you brought this up, because I did hear it the way you were talking about it. Like I heard, if you listen to last week's show, you'll hear your sentences after the statement. And there was this part of like, I'm not the person, I'll say it this way, I'm not the identity that I don't need to be the identity. Your past doesn't become your future.
Right.
And I think what you were really pointing to was the identity, right, that we can take on also from past narratives, and that we can take on from, and I can't remember exactly all the pieces that we went into in last week's show, but we were talking about sort of the things, and we have talked about the ideas that we subscribe to, right? The beliefs we subscribe to. So if we've subscribed to a belief that, I'm a bad person because someone said X or someone did X or I did X, right? I made a mistake. I did something. I went off track and now I'm a horrible, horrible person. Well, if I carry that around, how is that going to help me? And it's not necessary to keep doing that. So I did hear that you were talking about that. And to me, that it's the same thread because it's not being present to what's happening now. Are you even doing the act? If I said something really unsavory to someone, well, am I saying that thing right now? No. Did I say it before? Yes. Can I clean that up from the past? Yes. Does that make me who I am going into the future? No, only if I choose. Only if I choose that. So to me, it is very similar. And we're reframing pieces of it because when we talk about the identity, that is a real interesting experience, right? And how we create our identity and that we can create it and that we can reinvent it.
That for me is the real essence of what I get really excited about. I talk about this a lot. I'm not a fan of personality profile tests. I understand their value, and I see a lot of people is like, oh, wow, okay, this makes a lot of sense. However, unfortunately, what I've noticed with a lot of people is it seems like people self-diagnose themselves. Oh, this is who I am. And then they read about this. It's like, well, because I am an INTFJ or because I am a, dominated, blah, blah, blah. I'm an Enneagram 3, whatever the personality profile you are. It's like, okay, well, that means that I should avoid this and I should go all in on this. I'm like, well, the question is do you want to avoid that? And do you want to go in all of that? No, but my personality is this. I'm like, well, change your persona. Do you know what the the word persona stands for mask? Yes. And back in the Greek plays, they used to hold up these masks and play multiple characters. You could take that persona off and put on another one. It's like if you don't like your Enneagram 3, put on a 7.
Well, I want to speak to this, and I've studied the Enneagram.
Oh, and then we just lost Daphne again. Oh, she's back.
Where am I back?
Okay, so I just go right to where I had just talked about because you says that I like the Enneagram, and I know that you like the Enneagram, which I'm just now reminded of this. But go ahead, but I do see this a lot with a lot of my clients. It's like, no, I'm a this. Well, have you tried on a this?
Yes. So I love the Enneagram, and I studied it for a really long time. And it was a tool that at the time when I learned it, which was in my early 30s, probably, if I'm being candid, probably saved my life. It explained in many, many ways experiences that I had that I couldn't put my finger on and allowed me to understand myself in a way that I hadn't before. So there's truth to that for me. However, that tool, I think people can miss the plot because really what it starts to point to is also what I call the sort of get out of jail free cards. It's showing you where you have access to these other types. So for those of you who are familiar with the Enneagram, I type as an 8, which is, all kinds of names that they can give to that. The boss, the challenger, the powerful person, you pick the name depending on whose work you're reading. But it also shows where that type moves into being more of the caring person, the giver, the caretaker. It also shows where that type actually goes into more of the wisdom type, under different circumstances. And that tool also just really opened me to the reality that, oh, actually, this being can have access to all of the types.
Yes.
Now, I will have there's a particular leaning, and I see it sort of as a leaning, and I may have the propensity of having a certain set of lenses on so that and we'll talk about this, when I take in information, I may put it through a certain filter. However, it also shows me that I can take those lenses off. And I think, and having worked with a couple really skillful teachers on the Enneagram, that was really what I was taught, that you don't always have to be seeing the world through those lenses. Once you can see that you have the lenses on,
yes,
the idea is to be able to remove them and to recognize, oh, I may be taking in information through this way. This is a default pattern. And that's what it's really showing. It's showing you the default patterns of thinking, feeling, and behaving.
Is it so? When I think of default pattern, it is the pattern that goes along with the system of beliefs that I've adopted through my experiences and environments that I've grown up through. Is that what you mean by the default settings?
Absolutely. Okay. Yeah, the nature nurture part of things, right? So some things that I'm very aware of, other things I'm not.
So the reason why I bring that up is because there are some that I encounter who like, listen, I was born an Enneagram, whatever. It's like that's who I am. And I'm like, were you born that way, or did you develop those preferences and personality traits as a result of your experiences and as a way of coping and fitting in and all this other stuff? You know, the question is a little bit of everything. Because there is DNA memory that we talk about that gets handed down from generation to generation, traumas from not just our own past, but also in our DNA. So ancestral traumas.
Yeah, and what I hear you saying too, Cliff, is that, you know, we can use those tools unconsciously to justify.
That's what I'm getting at.
Our behaviors, or to justify our beliefs, or to justify our existence.
And here's what I'm getting at. I see it a lot in justifying our fears of moving forward with something new we want to create. Yeah. I desperately want something different than what I have now, but that's not for me because I don't have that personality type.
Yeah,
that's for me where it's like, okay, let's sit down and evaluate, because
that's just the way I am.
Because I look at who I am today. If I know for a fact I have some old, like 20-year ago personality tests. And if I was to go back and take the exact same test today, I am not the same person. I would not have the same personality traits. I am a completely different person on so many different levels. Are there going to be some things that, you know, that have flowed and have been a part of me since I was a child? Sure. Yes. Yeah. But I have intentionally deconstructed an incredible swath of conditioned beliefs and also perceptions that I've made about the world and reality and life itself as a result of going back and doing all sorts of you know, healing and trauma work and all this other stuff in my life.
Well, and let me go one step further. Since we're talking about being present, let's talk about being present with people. You know, in the spirit of certainty, what my mind will do is it will want to make sure that it can be certain about who you are. So what I will do, as I call this ising, I will is you.
Okay.
Cliff is that way.
Ah.
And what my mind will do, because it wants a sense of certainty about who I think you are, is it simply looks for patterns. It will X out, right? I'm going to go right back to the top of the show. It will X out anything that could make you seem different than the pattern that I have created in my mind. So I will see only the parts of you that A, I probably want to see on some level, B, that I'm comfortable with, and C, that make sure that I feel a little certain about you. And so we just is each other. Cliff is that way. Daphne is that way. So I miss, if I'm not mindful and careful about it, I will miss the nuances of you as a person. I will miss all of the places in you that have changed. And by the way, I want to say a lot about this. This is a big deal in leadership and people that are getting feedback. This has been proven as Marshall Goldsmith's research. This is fascinating. People would get 360 degree feedback from their team, and they would pick one or two things to work on. And they would start working. This happened to me, actually. They would start working on that thing. They didn't tell anybody what they were working on, but they'd start working on it, and they felt like they were making good progress. No one noticed. So I got feedback one time that I would interrupt a lot during meetings. And it was true. I would get very excited, or, you know, it was my way of controlling a room, and I have a very loud voice and personality, so I could do that. So it was true. And so I said, okay, I really don't want to be seen that way, and I know that it's not helpful, and I want to make sure I care about my colleagues. I want to make sure that people's voices are heard. So I will make sure, going forward in any meeting, that I do not speak first. Cliff, I did this for 6 months. I went back and asked my colleagues, people who give me feedback. Have you noticed I don't interrupt? No, no, I still think you're interrupting.
Yep.
And what Marshall Goldsmith really demonstrated was that if you don't tell people what you're working on, they won't notice.
It's like the reticular activating system.
Yes, it is. So, this is even being present with people, we tend to not notice their nuances. We don't and come to that with some appreciation because they is the way they is.
Yeah.
We is them like we do a lot of parts of our life, including ourselves.
So that is so fascinating, Daphne, because one of the things that I'm doing when I'm a coach, I don't always go into every single session like with the intention that I desire. But if I am at the peak of the right state right before I go into a coaching session, I want to remind myself the person that I'm about ready to speak is a divine, spiritual, unlimited being who can be, do, or have anything they desire to create. And anything to the contrary is nothing more than a story or a narrative that they have told themselves or they have agreed with that has been told to them. And so I refuse to believe their narrative.
And isn't it fun when you do? Because people will argue for their limitations like nobody's business. And self-included, by the way.
I get that, and I do as well. I can argue. I'm a great arguer for my limitations at times. It's like, no, let me tell you the reasons why I continue to do things this way.
Yes, this way. I have a perfect example. 20 examples.
It's so hilarious because I'm a firm believer in that the results you are getting are perfect for the system you have created. And yet I'm sitting here complaining about my results and I'm like, but I know the system that I'm doing is great. It's like, wait, I don't like the results, but my system is great. And I have this absolute firm belief, there's no doubt in my mind whatsoever that the results are perfect for the system I'm using.
And they are for the exact results you're getting. Yes. That's feedback, right?
It is feedback. And this is why one journals.
This is why one journals. So, when we come back to this idea of being present, being present with what we're doing in life and being present with others, like noticing and with ourselves. This part you're bringing in about the identity is so incredibly relevant because it's the same conversation. And now we've actually been able to we're talking about this in the state of relationships, which is the whole thing, right? Yeah. So how we relate to each other. Am I really present with what this being is capable of, what this being is really doing? Am I really present with who this being is? Or do I just simply put them in this box because it's more secure for me to do that? Do I put myself in this box? I'm glad you brought up the personality test. And by the way, a lot of people don't like them because they do feel like they're being put in a box. I've had many people say that to me, like, I don't like these because I'm not, and I've had clients say this to me, like, well, I feel like I'm one way at work, but I'm a different way at home.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
It's called a persona.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yes,
and at some level, we do have multiple personalities, and it's not a disorder. It's actually a way of experiencing life.
Yes, and it's a way of navigating. And if you can really tap into that, you can appreciate how flexible we really are.
In fact, I can tell you right now, the persona of an incredibly powerful CEO. Mm-hmm. If they don't change the mask and put on a different persona in their marriage and their, with their kids and stuff like that, things are not going to be so great. You need a different mask. You need a different persona. And so I don't know what the Enneagram numbers are, but if you're an 8 at the office, it might be good to try on a 4 or a 7 or a 6 or something of that nature at home.
2 for sure. Yeah, but that is the point. Is there not? No one is always anything. If I just come back to the general truth of impermanence.
Yeah.
No one is ever always anything, and that's crazy.
The other thing is these tests are typically a series of questions that you can answer in as little as 5 minutes and as much as 30 minutes. Maybe some are more complex than that, but they're pretty much that. And I can tell you right now, give me that right after I have had a series of, 6 months of incredible revenue growth year after year, month after month, and things are blah, blah, blah. And I'm constantly out. I will answer differently than a year and a half after the pandemic and experiencing some of the things that I've experienced lately and all these other things. The way that I feel in the moment will judge how I answer those questions, even if I'm answering them honestly.
That's right.
In the moment.
That is absolutely correct. It's called self-report bias. They have names for everything in research. Yes, it's actually, and it is a major limit with any self-report survey. And if I do it after I just got into a car accident versus I wasn't in one, or if it's a sunny day versus a rainy day, and I really like sunny days, and there are a lot of factors that can bias our responses. So you are 100% correct on that. So, and that's it's always worthy of going into these with a sense of caution.
So the title of today's episode is "The Power is in the Present Moment." To understand that in our present moment, we can evaluate, we can observe the meaning that we've associated to past events. We can observe the stories and narratives of what we're projecting into the future. But in the present moment, we also have the ability to shift that meaning, to shift the narrative, to shift our belief systems in the moment. We can change all of that. But I also want to talk about the Eckhart Tolle message of being present in the moment, and also how do we get in the moment. So let's kind of see if we can close on those two things.
Yeah, we definitely can. So if I had a Bible, it would probably be the A New Earth by Eckhart Tolle. If I had one, I don't, but if I did. And he gets to it's all about purpose. And you would think that he, in the book, he would tell you what your purpose is, and the essence is, and he does, it's to be where you are right now.
Yeah.
Right. To be present to what you're doing right now. And he gives 3 examples of awakened doing. And I love it so much. One of them is simply to accept. He isn't selling sort of the elixir that you need to be jazzed up about everything you're doing all the time in life. He just says, look, be in a state of acceptance. What you were talking about, Cliff, with non-resistance, right? Be in a state of acceptance. That's the first layer. The next layer is enthusiasm or enjoyment. Enjoy what you're doing. Find a sense of, what I call kind of like a little bit of effervescence, to what you're doing. So find some enjoyment. And the third is enthusiasm. Come to it with this, enthusiasm, entheos, means from God. And come to it with that, to recognize that this doing moment is a gift from God, and let me bring all of my heart and soul into this moment. So I won't get into intricate descriptions of each of these.
Does he also say in there without attachment to the outcome?
Yes.
Because that for me is one of the most. That is one of the most challenging aspects of the teaching.
Yes. In enjoyment, he talks about having the goal, and then in enthusiasm, he takes it to the next level. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
If there's one area that I'm still working through, and that is the doing without any attachment to the outcome. Yeah. And it's really great. I thought I had mastered it for a very long time. until certain outcomes weren't happening. And it's like, okay, I'm a little attached to that one.
That's so funny. You're like, man, I wish that really had been different. Yeah, I mean, it's a practice, right? All of this stuff that we talk about in this show, it is a practice. It is a choice. And it's in the spirit of relieving yourself of your own suffering. And by the way, when you do that, you're relieving everyone around you.
Yes.
Can't emphasize this enough. It's not a navel-gazing, purely just selfish sort of, the Buddhists would call it being wisely selfish. This is rippling out everywhere else. So anyway, so Eckhart Tolle talks about that in The Awakened Doing. And that, I've read, however long ago I read his book whenever that came out, but that was just really eye-opening to me, and I had just a different way of like, I don't have to be like jazzed about every single thing. I can come to enthusiasm, probably with a lot of things in my life. There are times when I just choose not to. I'm like, okay, I'm going to go do this thing. I don't necessarily like it. I probably could live without it, and I can come to it with a sense of acceptance. At minimum, a sense of acceptance, right? Yeah. Which is the first step of non-suffering. Because what is really important to me is that I'm not suffering. I'm not creating suffering for myself, because I know the moment that I do that, it will impact the people around me. And it will create my reality. My whole reality will just become that. So that is being present. Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up.
So how do we get into the present moment?
Yeah, it is a practice. One of the most, I think there are a few pathways here. One of the most important things, I think, is to recognize that there is a mind-body connection. And I think this gets skipped over a lot. So I know, for both of us, we have our practices of, working with the physical body, going to do exercise, intentional movement, I would even say, so that we are bringing our physiology into the process. So there's, for example, when we're exercising, we are getting endorphin releases. That does something for our body. The other part of this that I would add is our breathing patterns. So now this has come into vogue so much more, 4x4 breathing, using the breath as a means to access the presence, the present awareness of our mind, what our mind is doing, and it shifts our physiology. When we're sort of getting in that stuck state, our physiology is changing. We get bigger hits of cortisol, we get bigger hits of adrenaline. Our mind is really not able to stay present. So I really wanted to bring that up, that this mind-body connection is really important, and we can use the body and our physiology as a means of getting a little bit more present to what's going on in the mind. And then that becomes the question of, what are the stories are we telling ourselves?
Right.
What's the narrative? What am I ruminating on? What's the narrative I'm creating in here? And that's that cognitive emotional loop. So the mind and the body really work together. And I think this is something that can get skipped over. So in the moment is just giving yourself a moment to say, like, where am I right now?
Literally, where am I right now?
Yeah, literally, where am I right now? I am right here with Cliff Ravenscraft, right? Like, this is what is happening. Oh, then I noticed my mind drifted off to this. Let me come back. This is life becoming a meditation, and I wanted to say a little bit about meditation. I think there's a lot of misunderstandings about meditation too. So there's the practice of meditation. We can sit and use our breath as an anchor. And the idea behind that is simply to notice when our mind drifts away from being present with the breath. Now, we may experience relaxation, and we may experience a lot of different things during meditation. I'm less interested in the experiences, sort of these, mystical things that can happen, and they do. I get less interested in that, because those are just experiences that are happening, and those are going to come and go too.
Yep.
Nevertheless, it's just training ourselves to notice when our attention has drifted away from that moment. And that is a training. The more adept we become at that, the more we're aware of it, and the quicker we can bring it back to what's happening right now.
Yeah.
So that's really one of the, I would know, I think probably if I had miserable experiences regularly meditating, which I can, I'd probably still meditate, because it has shown me where my mind goes. It has shown me when I'm off in this thought train, instead of simply being like a woman sitting, watching the breath. So those are just,
well,
two or three things. I'm making sound very simple.
Yeah, no. So I definitely have those two things in alignment as well. The one thing that I want to speak about for me to get into the present moment is the use of meditation. And for the way that I like to discuss meditation is from a couple different levels. One, meditation for me is the idea of, am I able to control where I put my attention?
Yeah.
That's the question. And how many times do I lose that control? And then all of a sudden it's like, wow, that just happened. It's like, how did that happen? And just becoming aware of it, and then just bringing it back. And it is a practice. It is a self-discipline. The other thing that I think of when I think of meditation is the fact that there are so many different methods of meditation. And meditation doesn't have to be one particular spiritual path type of meditation. I've played around at least more than 10 different various types of meditation.
Me too.
Then the other thing that I like to think about is this. I'll never forget the first meditation that was a guided meditation. It invited me to, start off with the, being aware of my breath. And then it's like, okay, in your mind, imagine that you're walking through a forest, right? Mm-hmm. And then now I've come to this cabin or in the woods, and it could be a cathedral, it could be anything, but for me it was this pleasant cabin in the woods. And outside there's this table, all right? And because I'm hiking through the woods, I've got a backpack. Okay. And inside the backpack is all of my memories of the past, all of my to-do list items, all of my possessions, all of the things that I'm worried about. It's all in my backpack. Oof. And what I love about this imagery in my mind is like, okay, there's a sign that says inside you can go in and talk to whatever spiritual teacher you want. And so for me, I might want to go in and have a direct one-on-one experience with Jesus inside this building. But it says, leave all of your belongings on the table. None of that is you cannot bring any of that in. Lay it all down and then come in. Here's the good news. Should you want to pick up all of that stuff when you leave, it will still be there.
You can go back to worrying as scheduled.
Exactly. And so I love this imagery. And so I actually, in my mind, I lay all of that aside, and then I walk inside, and I'm in a completely different atmosphere. It's carefree. It's serene. It's peace. And I just sit and I just am. I just am. There's no other description of it. And then after some time, insights, inspiration, thoughts will start to flow. And then I'm like, okay. And then usually there's a dinging sound because I set a timer. And it's like, okay, it's time for me to go. And then I go and I pick up my backpack and I'm like, wait a second. There are a couple of things. There's a trash bin right over here. And I could just drop some of those. And my load is always lighter on the way out of that trip than it was going in.
That's so great. So that's a form of meditation, right? It's a visualization, which athletes use also, by the way, right? It's a form of visualization and bringing you into that connection, and then you let things go. I mean, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
Yes.
And for me, what it does is it's like, okay, how do I stop my concern about what's on my list and how all the pressures that are on my shoulders and all of the expectations that are on me today and all the demands and it's so much of it is just self-imposed. And I'm like, what am I doing? Why did I pack it's like funny enough, I've been going back to the gym. This is my 8th week back to the gym. And so there was a time, Daphne, I was packing up my backpack and I threw in my MacBook 16-inch MacBook Pro, my external hard drive. I brought my 12.9-inch iPad with me with another keyboard, and I brought all of this stuff. And I'm like, why am I carrying all this stuff with me?
I do understand though.
Yeah. No, I do. It's like, but what I decided is like, you know what? I think I could get by with just bringing my iPad, and I don't need to bring all that other stuff. If I wanted to, I could. At any point, I can. But I don't need to make it this regular practice of bringing all this stuff.
Yeah, and what I hear there, Cliff, is you're at choice.
I'm at choice.
You're at choice, right? I could bring it. Is that really what I really truly feel called to do? I'm at choice to either do it or not do it.
Yep.
That's freedom. Yep. Right. And I think that's the essence of being present as well.
That is the power of the present moment, is being at choice.
Yes. I have nothing to add to that.
Fun stuff. Guys, thank you so much for tuning into another episode. Daphne, what is your call to action this week?
Well, I want to call everyone over to Substack.
Okay.
And as a matter of fact, the post that I am going to post this week is going to build on this, incorporates a lot of what we just talked about, being present through a different lens. And I'm really excited to post this week. So it's called Not So Average Success. And I want to call everybody over there. If you haven't started following me on Substack, I would like to invite everyone to follow me over there. I'm starting to put all of my writings there. Writing is something that I'm putting a lot of attention on to really support people through their transformational process. If you're a leader in an organization, and even just in life, you're leading life, these essays are really intended to support that transformational process through my stories and experiences. They all have a little bit of research in them, but really sharing more of myself through my writing and experiences with people to support their processes too. So I would like to invite everyone over to Substack, and I am on there under DS Leadership Life.
Excellent. And of course, there's going to be a link to that in the show notes of this episode.
Yes, there will.
I just want to say that I read your Substack newsletter updates. I follow. It is amazing. I love reading your stories.
Thank you.
And
thank you.
Yes, I definitely can resonate with your recent golf ball. There are firsts. We need more first-time experiences in our life.
We do.
So
what's your call to action, Cliff?
My call to action is something that I don't know that I've mentioned before, but I was just chatting with a friend of mine, and I was telling him about the fact that I'm back to creating weekly content for the Cliff Ravenscraft Show. And I told him, I said, although my ideal client, like the best clients that I most love to work with, are this level, and I described it to him. He goes, Cliff, I've known you for years, and I never once knew that that's who your ideal client, like your best clients are. And so I'm going to let people know. So I sit there, I said, my best clients are somebody who has already succeeded in building incredible wealth. They have had a very successful career, most of which are people who have been entrepreneurs, owned their own business for the last 15, 20 years, maybe more. And they recently sold it for like 8 figures, 7 figures, something like that, multiple 7 figures. And now they're trying to figure out, who am I now that I don't actually own this business that I owned for the last several decades of my life? Who am I in my relationship with my spouse when my spouse was my business partner? And that was the primary focus of our relationship for the last several decades. Yeah. Who am I now that, and the other thing is I don't need to work, so I don't need to reinvent my career. I don't need any more money. And I have all these hobbies, and I just don't know what my purpose in this world is anymore, because my purpose was so tied up into owning a business. And I don't want to turn any of my hobbies into a business, because I don't want to, in my mind right now, I believe that if I was to turn any of these hobbies into a business, I would enjoy them less. And so I love working with people's mindsets. And you know what my friend said to me? He goes, wow, that's crazy. I just had a friend of mine talking to me and said almost all of those exact things. I should put you in touch. And we actually are scheduled to talk at 1:00 today. Oh,
that's so great. I just want to say a word about this too, from my own experience of working with you as a client. I mean, you have supported me to go through that exact transition. I effectively retired last year. I don't have to work. But that is just, it's critical. It is a big transition in people's lives. And, I encourage everyone to find something you absolutely love doing for your work, have a great career, and get out of it as quickly as you can. So that you don't have to do it. Best advice I can give. So, Cliff, I really hope that if you are someone like that you reach out, because Cliff, that is absolutely a genius of yours.
Yep. I would love to help you rediscover who am I now in this next season of my life. Help you decide what that purpose is, what that future looks like, what relationships look like, how you can show up. So many things have been hard. You've created this neural network of, this is who I am and this is what life is. Yeah. And if you're not consciously aware of those things and you don't know how to ask the right questions of yourself to underlie it, you will go out and create yourself another business.
Yeah.
Because it's who you are.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Just to hold on to something. That identity conversation for sure.
So that's my call to action. If that's you, or if you know somebody, just email me, cliff@cliffravenscraft.com. Put next stage of life in the subject line.
That's perfect.
Awesome.
Okay.
We'll be back next week.
We'll see you then.
All right. Bye, everybody.